Welcome to Crossroads. The United States has a brand new holiday, and this is Anti-Communism Week. And it was actually proclaimed by the White House retroactively. Now, I'll be going to what it entails in today's episode because it's a pretty big deal. Also, meanwhile, speaking of communism, New York City is going that way a little bit. They've now elected a Democratic Socialist as mayor, and the DSA, well, it has plans for the city as well, which have now been revealed. Also, speaking of global communism, the Chinese Communist Party, one of the world's most brutal regimes, having killed 50 to 70 million people, has new policies to continue this campaign of mass murder, and infants are now being referred to as human gold mines as sources for organ transplants. I'll be talking about these topics a lot more today. Before we begin, though, I have a brand new documentary coming out. That is Truth Under Fire, the story of Charlie Kirk, coming out on November 19th, coming up real soon, completely free to watch. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Epoch TV, doesn't matter. All you need to do is just register. You can watch it totally free. We have the link for that in the description, so be sure to check it out. And also, let me show you the trailer for that documentary right now.
Charlie is a massive, massive political and cultural threat to that ideology. So you got to kill him, and that's the way these people think. It's monstrous.
Charlie Kirk was presented as an anti-Semite, as a purveyor of misinformation, as being someone on what they call the hard right.
He's been slandered and lied about by people on the left.
Charlie Kirk was shot down on a college campus, not with a weapon in his hand, but with a microphone.
What kind of threats did Charlie face, and did he ever confide in you about these?
He would say, you know, this is a dark time spiritually, and pray for me. He'd ask for that.
How was Charlie Kirk framed by the narrative system?
He was always such a generous man.
I really appreciated how bold Charlie Kirk is.
He gave me the ability to speak out.
Charlie was gracious. He was a Boy Scout. He was the best of us. That's the one you shot? That's the one you decided to kill?
How do you think his faith impacted his political ideas?
I always say he was the most misunderstood missionary in America because he saw politics as an on-ramp to Jesus. But fear never enveloped him. If there was a heavy spiritual moment, he would ask people to pray. He was the most honest man I've ever met in my entire life.
They want their nation and they're willing to fight for it.
And I think that's what happened with Charlie.
I can't wait for y'all to see it. It's been a lot of work putting this together. Those of you who watch the show have seen me on the road quite a bit. I'm going to keep doing it. I've got other stuff in the works, but for this documentary, 9 p.m. Eastern on the premiere day. That's going to be Wednesday, November 19th. You can join me also for a special additional episode. We're going to do a live Q&A session about the documentary. So again, 9 p.m. Eastern time, November 19th. Join me, and I'll see y'all there as well. Now, that said, let's jump into today's stories because a lot's going on. Now, look, first of all, the White House has proclaimed Anti-Communist Week, where we celebrate anti-communism and learn about the brutal history of communism. This is a new week, and it's going to be where the country is going to remember the devastation of communism, the programs of mass murder, the programs to destroy religion, to suppress freedom, and to undermine basic values, and alongside this, to recognize the United States and its role of fighting against this, that we are diametrically opposed to the communist world. The United States is going to also renew its promise to stand against communism and uphold liberty. And having a week to recognize this, that's a big deal. Let me show you the official White House announcement. It says this: by the President of the United States of America, a proclamation. This week, our nation observes Anti-Communism Week, a solemn remembrance of the devastation caused by one of history's most destructive ideologies. Again, 100 million to 150 million people killed by this disgusting system. Again, older estimates, if you go by the Black Book of Communism, would say 100 million. I think they're going by that number because it says this. It says, across continents and generations, communism has brought devastation upon nations and souls. More than 100 million lives have been taken by regimes that sought to erase faith, suppress freedom, and destroy prosperity earned through hard work, violating the God-given rights and dignity of those they oppress. This is important too, because I mentioned the United States is really diametrically opposed to this. When they talk about the communist system violating the God-given rights and dignity of those they oppressed, what America does represent fundamentally is an idea that your rights are given to you by God, and the government is in place to protect God-given rights. In other words, your rights don't come from government, your rights come from God. We create government among ourselves to guard those rights, and that is the purpose of government. Communism is the opposite. They believe in destroying all of this because they want to dominate totally. It notes this as well, though. As we honor their memory, we renew our national promise to stand firm against communism. A promise of the United States to, quote, stand firm against communism, to uphold the cause of liberty and human worth, and to affirm once more that no system of government can ever replace the will and conscience of a free people. It states as well, for more than a century, communism has brought nothing but ruin. And that's true, actually. Communism can only survive and do well, ironically, when it can suck the life force out of a capitalist system. People say, well, what about China? Well, look, the new China was not built by the CCP. The new China was built by Western investment and Western capitalism. They were basically just a third world communist hellhole up until the time when Western investment poured in after they did the reforms and opening up. It was Western innovation, Western investment, and Western capitalism that built the quote-unquote new China. And as soon as they move away from that, which they have been, you're going to watch them return to just another communist hellhole, which they're very rapidly going back towards. Every communist country has experienced the exact same thing. There's never been any exceptions to it. And that's the reality. But it continues stating this: wherever it spreads, communism, it silences dissent, punishes beliefs, and demands that generations kneel before the power of the state instead of standing for freedom. Again, even in China, where you can say, hey, look at all this money from Western capitalism, the abuses of human rights, all of these things still are in place to horrifying extents. It states that its story has been written in blood and sorrow, a grim reminder that communism is nothing more than another word for servitude. In the 34 years since the end of the Cold War, the world has witnessed both the triumph of democracy and the persistence of tyranny in new forms. New voices now repeat old lies, cloaking them in the language of social justice and democratic socialism. A nice little jab here. Cloaking them in the language of social justice and democratic socialism. In other words, they're saying these are the new communists. Tyranny in new forms, according to the White House. It says, yet their message remains the same. Give up your freedom, place your trust in the power of the government, and trade the promise of prosperity for the empty comfort of control. That little lion in the cage longing for the savannah. It says, America rejects this evil doctrine. It says, we remain a nation founded on the eternal truth that liberty and opportunity are the birthrights of every person, and that no ideology, whether foreign or domestic, can extinguish them. And it states, as we mark Anti-Communism Week, we stand united in defense of the values that define us as a free people. We honor the victims of oppression by keeping their cause alive, by ensuring that communism and every system that defines the rights of life, that denies the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the American ideal, in other words, will find their place once and for all on the ash heap of history. Stating, in other words, that communism is damned to fail. It continues stating that now, therefore, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim the week of, and this they did this retroactively, it says November 2nd through November 8th, 2025 is Anti-Communism Week. Importantly, I don't know why they did this. They just announced this, but they did the week a week late, so they retroactively announced Anti-Communism Week. It's not clear they're going to do this every single year. I assume they will. But it states, in other words, that in witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 7th day of November in the year of our Lord 2025, and of the independence of the United States of America, 215th. Donald J. Trump. Big deal, folks. Because not only is this a recognition of the devastation of communism, of the continued global communist revolution, the campaign under other names, the exact same policies wearing a different skin. What this is also doing is reasserting the American idea and what America stands for, and noting that America is diametrically opposed in our founding principles to what communism represents. If you were to understand the true story of the world, if you understand the battles of the 20th century, if you were to understand the current plight we're in now, of the rise of the Chinese Communist Party, of its plans for war against the United States, of the entire, basically cartel world that we are battling against, what is really going on is you're watching a global battle, now and in the past, of freedom versus socialism. That is what's happening in this world. And if you understand this battle of freedom versus socialism, you also understand something else. Every major conflict, all the ideological battles we have, the moral battles we have, this is not a new battle, it's an old battle. And you can actually trace a lot of this back to the late 1700s with the creation of two systems in the world. The American idea arising through the American Revolution, and the communist idea arising through the French Revolution. Leading, of course, into the Paris Commune of 1871, 100 years later, and into the modern communist revolutions. The American idea versus the communist idea, both of which were rooted in also diametrically opposed ideological worldviews. The Great Awakening in the United States, the revival of religion, versus the Enlightenment of Europe and the rise of atheism. These two systems, the recognition of God being a moral authority versus the recognition of humanity's plight against moral authority and the attempts to destroy it to create the man-made world. This has defined the current plight of our civilization. This is freedom versus socialism. It is now, it always has been. Also on that point too, happy Veterans Day to all the Americans who fought against socialism, who fought against communism, who went to the jungles of Vietnam and fought against the Viet Cong and the Vietnamese, who tried to stop that country from falling into the hands of communism, who fought against the Chinese Communist Party in the Korean War, which we were fighting both against North Korea and against the CCP, who created a bastion of freedom in really just the heart of communism, right, South Korea, and showed what the difference is between freedom and socialism, between North Korea and South Korea. That you can have a light, a tiny light, right, in that part of the world, really contrasted against the darkness of communism to the north. To the Americans, those who remain still, who fought against Nazism, National Socialism, and attempts to really blanket the entire world with that ideology. To the Americans who fought and unrecognized for this against against Soviet Union during the Cold War, when they were trying to spread communism to every corner of the earth, using violent revolutions, sparking up just terrible movements, genocides all across the world, who were training cartels and rebels and so on to launch genocides, massacring people. When America stood against this, a lot of you were demonized for standing against it, but I think history will remember what you did. To the Americans who fought against the terrorists, really an ideology, I should note, which is not recognized as such, but is rooted actually in communist ideology. The modern terrorist movements go actually back to anarcho-communism, which actually were leading to bombings throughout the United States in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Terrorist movements, which the Bolsheviks also represented. Terrorist movements, the training of terrorists in the Middle East by the Soviet Union, yes, including Yasser Arafat. And the rise of the modern terrorist movements within the Islamist world through a man named Sayyid al-Qutb in his book Milestones, which created all of those movements. The Muslim Brotherhood launching communist revolutions. Sayyid al-Qutb called the Karl Marx of the Arab world. And unknowingly, many of you were also fighting a battle against communism, just under different forms. To those of you now who fight quietly in your school boards, to those of you now who fight quietly, going to the polls, fighting against the new wave of communism under different names yet again, I recognize all of you. So thank you for your service, all of you. Happy Veterans Day. I'll go on to another topic. Speaking of communism, New York City has now elected a Democratic Socialist as mayor, and the DSA, well, it has plans for the city as well. They've now been revealed. I'll be talking about what's happening and what this means after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. New York City has now elected a Democratic Socialist as mayor. And although Mamdani ran on the Democratic Party ticket, he is a member of the Democratic Socialists. He's affiliated with the Democratic Socialists of America, of which he is also a member. Some suggest this may violate maybe some questions of are you or have you ever been a member of a communist party when you become an American citizen? The big question is, well, does being a socialist mean you're also a communist? We don't define it as such, but actually, yes, socialism is the form communism takes when implemented into government. There's no such thing as a communist government. It's a socialist government, and again, communism is the ideology that motivates it. Communism, if attained by government, would lead to the negation of systems. Communism in practice, in government, is always socialism. And so it's the same thing. Again, communists, the reason they say that communism has never been practiced is because communism technically would mean the negation of systems, meaning it would have to destroy the political system in order to, quote, achieve itself. So any time you bring it into government, it's always socialism. Socialism is communism in that sense. But the DSA also has a plan for the city, for New York City, now being revealed. A lot of this is about anti-Israel stuff. Just the News explained this. They say they obtained an internal planning document from the New York City DSA's anti-war working group, which shows the group has spent weeks plotting how to pressure the new Mamdani administration to carry out their socialist demands, including demands to push an anti-Israel agenda in New York City Hall. Now, importantly, Mamdani suggests that he's not falling under the directives of DSA. What the DSA document states is they plan to pressure him to implement these types of policies. So again, he's trying to separate himself from this a bit, and they're trying to force it upon him. But it says this. The document from the group, obtained by Just the News, is titled AWWG, Palestine Policy Meeting, Agenda and Notes, and it contains the internal plans of the DSA working group. The document was obtained when a Just the News reporter used his real name to RSVP in one of the meetings that was listed as open to the public. What a nice turn of events. It states further in the DSA's National Platform section on the foreign policy, focuses first on Palestine, saying free Palestine, an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, an end to military and economic aid and weapons sales to Israel, respect the authority of International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice and national sovereignty for the Palestinian people. It notes as well the second item on the DSA national platform calls to end the U.S. war machine, greatly reduce the U.S. military budget, close overseas bases, and bring troops home. Now, why would DSA care about this? Look, I know everybody feels very strongly on one side or the other in most of these conflicts. Let me give my take on it. In my opinion, the specific issue is never the issue. When they talk about basically pulling the United States back from foreign interventionism, I don't like war. If we could end every war on earth, wonderful. What a great thing. What is the reality of this? The global U.S. military presence, the overseas bases, represents what's called the Pax Americana. It is the peace under America. It is the representation of the American idea in every corner of the world. And what is the American idea? If you want to talk in technical terms, it's called the liberal democratic world order, as defined by these. When we talk about liberal, I don't mean like American liberals, you know, and they're interesting events. What I'm talking about is liberalism, as in classical liberalism, which is the basis of Thomas Paine and, you know, the American idea. It's the idea that you are endowed by your Creator with certain God-given rights, and you're allowed to choose for yourself how you live your life. It means that you can choose for yourself. Do you want to succeed or fail? It means you can apply yourself and raise through the ranks of different social classes, or not apply yourself and become homeless. It's your choice. It means that nobody forces a certain life upon you. You can choose to follow your morals or to violate them, because the moral plight of humanity is the choice we're given. That this is the choice given to us as part of, you know, what religion is, and that if you force this upon people, not only do you not represent a true moral authority, but very likely you'll turn people against a moral authority. Religion forced upon people is not true religion. Religion forced upon people will actually destroy religion. Nationalizing a religion, forcing it upon people, will undermine the basic moral values by creating false moral authority. And so the American founders, fleeing from religious persecution, saying, I have different beliefs than you. My interpretation of my faith is different from yours. I recognize that you've been violating this faith, in fact, while you've tried to represent a moral authority. Came to flee to the United States from that false system to the United States and formed what became the American system. The idea of liberal democracy is, again, I will live as I choose to live, and I will respect your right to live as you choose to live. You are endowed by your Creator with God-given rights, and I recognize those rights as part of my faith. That is the American idea. But also the recognition that we are endowed by our Creator with certain God-given rights. The right to believe what you want to believe. That means tolerating ideas I might not believe in. That means tolerating values I may not recognize. But again, as part of this idea of freedom, we should recognize it, because forcing people into a certain moral system, again, will actually undermine it more times than not. And the American experiment was basically saying, we believe that if we do this, we grant humans a certain moral authority to choose for themselves how they live. We grant to humans freedom of speech with the belief that the marketplace of ideas will allow us to debate and come to truth. The idea that if you don't have a certain rigid system of saying you're born into this job, your grandfather did it, your great-grandfather do it, and you're going to do it too, whether you like it or not, as opposed to saying you're guaranteed nothing in life, work hard and you'll succeed, don't and you're going to be homeless, hey, we'll see how it goes. That has actually created more wealth than any political system in the history of humanity. This was the American experiment, the idea that freedom can create a prosperous society. Now, the American idea has been battling for the past, well, since its beginning, in fact, because we rose almost parallel to the rise of communism and socialism. Again, with French Revolution, the conspiracy of Babeuf and other things. that did lead into the 1800s and the communist experiment. America has always been the diametrically opposed system to that. Every tyrant in the world has recognized us as their enemy because of this. All the tyrants of Europe, all the kings of the world, every dictator on earth recognizes the American idea as a threat to their authority, because the people of those dictatorial systems recognize that they long for freedom. They long for what we have. And America, whether you agree with it or not, has worked to maintain this moral authority in the world, has worked to maintain this idea of liberty in the world. And so when we talk about the liberal democratic world order, it's also referred to by our enemies as the unipolar world order, the peace under America, the American idea represented on the world stage. Now, as part of this, we have military bases all around the world. We do. As part of this, we act as the world police. We do. As part of this, we sanction countries that step outside the boundaries of this. Sometimes we don't do it very well, okay? Let's be honest with ourselves. But the question is not doing it well sometimes better than not having it? Well, let me tell you the alternative to it. The alternative to it, being planned and implemented by the enemies of freedom, by the enemies of the United States, is what they call the multipolar world order. This is the peace under China, the Pax Sinica, as they call it. The peace under China, the Pax Sinica, is also called the China model. What does that represent? It means globally do as thou wilt. Don't question us. Don't challenge us. Do as thou wilt to your citizens. We will not question you. And to question it is to do evil, not to challenge, again, tyranny. What they want is a system where a government can abuse their citizens in any way they choose, harvest their organs, enslave them, terrorize them, murder them, genocide them. That is not evil by their definition. What is evil is if you question it. If you call it evil is when you that yourself have done something wrong. That is the Pax Sinica. They want to represent that system by, again, destroying what they call the Pax Americana, also the peace under America, also the unipolar world order, the one system, the, again, liberal democratic world order, and replace it with the multipolar world order, the peace under China, the Pax Sinica. And what they want is basically the United States to be a single voice at the world table. We'll sit alongside Canada, we'll sit alongside Mexico, we'll sit alongside Uganda and sit alongside China and sit alongside Russia as a tiny voice among many at the world table. And they will tell us, again, America, get back in your corner. You have no power here. That is what they want. And so the idea of shutting down everything that America represents globally, while it may sound great, hey, bring American troops home, close the overseas bases, stop all forms of foreign interventionism. While I would love to see every war and every conflict in the world come to an end, America does represent something important for the world. And us pulling back from that would be detrimental to the basic freedoms of humankind. It would. And so that's why they want it. It again sounds very moral to talk about it, but what they want is the opposition would be a global tyranny. What they want in opposition is a tyrannical, abusive, murderous, genocidal force that would enslave all of humanity. And I mean this in very literal terms. They want things, for example, like the 15-minute cities. They want things, for example, like, digital IDs. They want things, for example, like global internet censorship. They want things, for example, like the Chinese social credit system implemented in every corner of the world. They want things, for example, like the crushing of human rights. If you want to get into the real diametrically opposed system, they want the China model to dominate the world. And there's different names for this. It's called, they call it state socialism, right? State capitalism, meaning the state has seized the means of production, meaning communism, meaning socialism in practice, the state capitalist monopoly. The Western system they have for this is called, it's called national Bolshevism. The idea of this coming about through individuals such as some of the main advisors to Vladimir Putin, for example. Guys like Dugin is what they call national Bolshevism. The idea of this is that the past 100 years have been defined as a global battle between liberal democracy, fascism, Nazism, and communism. And the belief that liberal democracy won the Cold War. The recent 50 years of the world have been defined by the liberal democratic world order, and they believe a final battle needs to take place to determine the future of our world. They believe that the way to do that is to merge the systems of fascism and communism. They refer to this as National Bolshevism, and that the National Bolshevik world order will be used to defeat the liberal democratic world order. And so when you see these quote-unquote moral authorities claiming to represent the new conservatism, they don't. What they're trying to represent is National Bolshevism. They represent National Bolshevism. They're lying to you. And what they want to destroy is what they call the liberal democratic world order, which should not be confused with what we regard as liberalism here in the United States. What they mean is destroying the American idea. That's what they're referring to. And so back on this is the plan. This is what they're trying to implement. And the article here notes this. Mamdani told reporters in August that, quote, my platform is not the same as national DSA, because DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, is trying to implement this. And it states that when asked if he wanted to eliminate misdemeanor criminal offenses as the DSA platform calls for, legalizing misdemeanor crimes, it states that Mamdani said no. You can't find that on my platform because it's not there. It's not part of his platform, but he has stated, defund the police stuff previously. You could argue it's not part of his current platform, but it was part of his ideology stated previously. Now that said, former President Barack Obama is also now saying the Democrats should embrace this brand new socialist uprising in their party as the DSA tries to replace the Democratic Party as it once was. This was actually said during an appearance on the Pod Save America. This was released on Friday. Watch.
Tuesday was nice, but we've got a lot of work to do. And your task is going to be not to impose, litmus tests. We had Abigail Spanberger win, and we had Zohran Mamdani win, and they are all part of a vision for the future. Our job is to say that we want everybody engaged.
So this is actually part of a deeper battle taking place within the Democratic Party right now. A lot of them do not like it. Nancy Pelosi's announced she's not going to rerun for her position. She might run for something else. Schumer did not endorse Mamdani. A lot of them really don't like this new socialist uprising within their party. Although Trump and others often call the Democrats socialists, many of them oppose socialism. In fact, when it's actually been voted on, many of them, the majority of them vote against it. They don't like it. The challenge they have is the grassroots of the party, which is the vocal minority, which is, again, the ones out on the street protesting. They have come to represent the visual, most surface part of the party. And those groups do not represent the technical, moderate Democrat. Look, Trump used to be a Democrat. RFK Jr. used to be a Democrat. The Democratic platform of Bill Clinton is not much different from the current Trump platform. It was tough on crime. It was 3 strikes. It was anti-illegal immigration. It was kind of moderate. You might disagree with some things, but it was relatively... By today's standards, like Trump could campaign on the same thing, and people would call it MAGA. It has changed quite a bit. And a lot of them within the Democratic Party do not agree with this new radical uprising. A lot of them also don't think it's going to win national elections. The experiment with this in New York City, with the Democratic Socialists actually coming out on top, actually placing their candidate within the Democratic Party itself, is seen as kind of the future of the party by some. Some of them want this, many of them do not. And there are people now pushing for this to become the new face of the party. Will that happen? We'll have to see. On another topic, though, well, something else is happening. The trans movement. It's now coming to an end. It's not even just in the United States. It's actually ending globally. And it's even now being weighed for the Olympics. Daily Mail said this. It says a ban on transgender women competitors. I assume they mean men who say they're women, okay? I can't keep up with this stuff, I'll be honest with you. Transgender women competitors, they say, is strongly expected to be in place, a ban on them for the 2028 Olympics, but it remains unclear if there will be barriers against athletes with differences of sexual development after the boxing furor of Paris 2024. Because many people were saying that the female boxer was actually a man. That was a man, baby. They were saying there was like a difference in sexual development. I guess the person was a hermaphrodite. I don't know. I'm just as confused as some of these people may be, but it states here. Under the existing rules, each sport is empowered to decide if transgender women can compete if their testosterone levels fall below a designated threshold, which is an interesting way to do it. Okay, look, let's go by testosterone here. Maybe that's a way to do it. They say under new president Christy Coventry is in discussion about a dramatic policy shift that would impose a blanket ban across all sports for the Los Angeles Games. Now look, it is a reality of human biology that testosterone will help you build muscle. If you're a bodybuilder and you're shooting up testosterone, you're probably going to notice huge gains in muscle and stuff like that. You're basically doing steroids. I know it's a little bit different, but it's basically the same thing. So it is a fair question to say, look, if you have a female athlete popping testosterone and building muscle mass in ways that biologically they really shouldn't be able to, does that represent using performance-enhancing drugs? It's a fair question to ask, right? How do they define this? Because the reality of the trans movement is they need a lot of medication to do it. They need a lot of medication to do it. And does that medication qualify as, again, performance-enhancing drugs? It's an easy way that they could use to try to regulate these things within Olympic Games. Because the other thing you see is that you get these women who just take tons of testosterone and they dominate, or you get men who claim they're women and they just go and bash a bunch of women and wave their trophy in the air basically. But look, we'll see if that happens. On another topic, Columbia University, which has an interesting history in the United States, that the home of the home of cultural communism. Through, again, the Frankfurt School, Columbia University, they're being pressed to drop their new communist ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Washington Examiner says this: in an effort to protect America's sovereignty over its higher education system, Congress urged Columbia University to cut its ties to communist China and adopt a stricter vetting process for its donors, students, and partners. And it says this, quote, your university and its student groups to discontinue any exchange programs that are supported by entities with ties to the Chinese Communist Party and commit to a rigorous review of foreign funding of student groups. House Select Committee of the Chinese Communist Party Chairman John Molinar wrote to Columbia University President Claire Shipman. In other words, if you're taking money from the Chinese Communist Party, if you have organizations at your school taking money from the Chinese Communist Party, if you have people backed by the Chinese Communist Party, you may just have foreign spies in your midst. And hey, maybe you shouldn't allow that. I should note briefly, one of the main organizations of the Chinese Communist Party, in fact funded by, organized by, and operated by the Chinese consulates, is called the Chinese Student and Scholar Associations. They have them at just about every major American university. Columbia actually got rid of theirs after there was the mystery of a Chinese student beheading one of their fellow students and then stuffing the body inside a wall. We never got answers on what actually happened there, but shortly after, Columbia University, for some strange reason, forced the closure of the CSSA, the Chinese Student and Scholar Association. But of course, the way the CCP works is they'll just start a new branch under a different name because that's how they do it. But they continue stating this, quote, I consider CCP-affiliated entities malign influence campaigns that exploit academic institutions and foreign students through United Front organizations, the United Front being one of the main overt spy branches of the Chinese Communist Party, actually working as one of the greatest forms of foreign influence in the United States. People talk about foreign influence. Why are they talking about this? This is the greatest form of it. Compromising American businesses, compromising politicians, compromising media, compromising influencers, compromising Hollywood, and we let it happen. But they say that this is being used to compromise academic institutions and students, the United Front organization. And they say, and its insidious strategy of co-option, coercion, and concealment to be these serious threats, to America. And I'd agree with them, this is a serious threat to America. It states as well, the chairman's letter comes after Colombia embraced the Chinese student organization Greater China Initiative. What a great thing it sounds, right? Greater China Initiative, which will host a trip in January 2026 to students, to university students in Beijing. A grand old propaganda trip for a grand old propaganda time. Potemkin Village tour of the Chinese Communist Party. Speaking of the Chinese Communist Party also, they've found ways to create wealth. Again, they're now a state capitalist monopoly, aka a socialist system, and they found ways to make money. The regime has policies now to use infants, babies, as living sources for organ transplants, murdering infants for their organs. This is China in Focus from our sister media NTD. Watch.
Newborn babies are seen as the future of families, but in communist China, many of them were born as part of the regime's human gold mines. Investigative reports found an underground transplant industry in China that's built around harvesting organs from infants for huge profits. And just a warning, some viewers may find the following content disturbing.
The concept of infant or child organ transplants is not new. Younger patients can typically only receive smaller-sized organ transplants. American doctors normally conduct 500 to 600 child-to-organ transplant operations annually. In just one category, child liver transplants, China's yearly cases already double those of the U.S., reaching about 1,000 each year. That's on top of a growing trend. Child or infant organs in China are also used to service adults. A doctor from a top-ranking hospital in southern China's Sichuan province openly praised the benefits of using a child's organ in an adult's body.
Infant donor kidneys, their quality is actually very high. There are several reasons for this. First, their kidneys are much more resistant to heat and lack of blood supply compared to adult donor kidneys. Second, these kidneys have a remarkable regenerative ability. After being transplanted into a recipient, they can grow rapidly in a short period of time. According to our research data, within about 6 to 9 months, they can grow to nearly the size of an adult kidney.
The number of documented child transplants in China has seen steep increase. That's despite the declining birth rate nationwide.
Absolutely horrifying. Human gold mines. Human gold mines. In America, people often refer to infants, babies, as little bundles of joy. Under the Chinese Communist Party, they refer to them as bundles of organs waiting to be harvested. Human gold mines. Ways to make money. That's the value of a human life under the Chinese Communist Party. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If we allow this to continue, it's going to spread, right? They start by killing a handful of religious believers. Some people say, well, that's not my religion, why would I care? It's that religion now, it's going to be something else tomorrow. They're already doing it to Christians. Again, they started with Falun Gong practitioners. They did it to Muslim Uyghurs now. They're doing it now to just random people. It's what they do to the unwanted of society, and if they don't want babies, they do it to them too. If we allow this to continue, they're going to push this on the international medical journals, the international medical systems. They're already doing this. There's already foreign travel for organ transplants. In fact, some countries even prop it up with their medical systems. Chinese Communist Party human organ harvesting, murder on demand, is a global problem. We allow this, we don't push back on it, and I question why. Why does the United States not challenge this? Why does the free world that declares and pays lip service to never again, never again, why do we work with them? Why do we send our money there? Why do we send our pensions there? If we want to have a true moral debate in what we represent, why do we not universally condemn this? At what point do we have to feel like we're losing our humanity by allowing this to happen? Human gold mines, infants, babies, being murdered for their organs for profit. What a horrifying concept. Have we lost our humanity allowing this to happen? Why is this not being condemned by every major figure on earth? Why is this not being condemned? And I'd also question, how many have even heard about this? How many of you saw this being reported in any other media? How many of you have heard of this anywhere so far? Why is it only being said here? Why are we the only ones talking about this? This should be one of the greatest recognized crimes on the face of the planet. And why is it that you can only hear it here? Because it's not being condemned, it's not being exposed, and it's not being talked about. If we continue on this track, we're going to lose our humanity, and I hope to God that people speak out about it. That said, intense episode today, I know, but a lot going on. Questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion. All right. First of all, Jerry, you're saying, Josh, if the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, forces moderate Dems out, or like they did for Kennedy, like RFK Jr., Trump, etc., could that swing the Republican Party left of center? And would that force more constitutional members out to form a new constitutional conservative party? Good question. Okay, so you're asking basically if Democratic Socialists of America basically takes over the Democratic Party. So in other words, let's say the basic. Okay, let's talk about the way the parties have changed, right? If you go back to pre-Trump, right? Maybe let's say pre-Tea Party, right? Remember the Tea Party movement? A return to constitutionalism in America. I would actually say MAGA is more a continuation of the Tea Party movement than it was the Republican Party. Go back to the time of George W. Bush. Obama was not yet president. What was the differences between the Democrats and the Republicans? They weren't that different. They really weren't. They were different on some things, right? The Democrats were more pro-union. You could say the Republicans were more like pro-war a little bit. Again, that was a time when, look, Joe Biden was one of the 3 strikes guys, okay? Like 3 strikes, you're out, 25 to life. 3 felonies, right? If you commit 3 felonies, it's 25 to life. That was the Democrats. Kamala Harris was putting people away for life for possession of marijuana. That was the Democrats, okay? What was his name? Elias Gonzalez, that Cuban kid, was trying to escape communism in Cuba, and the Democrats were so against illegal immigration that there was that famous photo of the I don't remember the actual law enforcement branch they sent to take that kid and deport him, but there was that famous photo of the guy with the military helmet and the MP5 submachine gun, pointing it at this little kid screaming in his closet to be deported. That was the Democrats, okay? Imagine if Trump did that, okay? Imagine right now if Donald Trump sent ICE to go and deport a Cuban kid. The kid's I don't know, how old was Elias Gonzalez? He was 10 or something? He was a kid, right? Imagine if Trump did that. And there was a photo of an ICE agent with an MP5, a submachine gun, pointing it at a little kid in a closet, and the kid is screaming as a gun points at him of a game of hide-and-go-seek gone wrong, and he's going to be deported. How do you think the media would react? How do you think the media would... What would the story be? They'd probably call Trump Hitler, that he's terrorizing children. They would call him every bad name in the book. During Bill Clinton's time in office, that was the Democratic Party. Okay? If you look at their policies now, and not even what Republicans are doing, but what Republicans say they want, a lot of what they want, 3 strikes, 25 to life, tough on crime, mass deportations. If we were to take the Democrat policies of Bill Clinton and put them in place for Trump, it would be called extreme. Okay? Like that is how much we've changed politically. The irony is that what Trump is campaigning on, the MAGA party, they call it, why does he win? It's probably because it's a big tent party. People call it far right. It's not. It's more moderate. It's what captures voters. It's why Trump won the popular vote. It is representing more voters. And so you have extremes of both sides, right? You really do. I would argue that what Trump represents is basically politics in the late 80s in America. That's what he represents. And so the question is, what becomes of the parties after this? Well, the Democrats now are getting overtaken by DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. They're being pushed very far left. They want like open, I mean, I showed you some of their policies. You could say Mamdani does not represent this. He's challenging some of these things. Not every candidate represents the full DSA ticket, but DSA itself basically wants the multipolar world order. They want non-interventionism. They want this kind of globalist system of, again, the multipolar world order. They want America at the global seat of it. They want us to get rid of all of our military presence. They want new forms of really social control and censorship and other things like that. They want basically the legalization or decriminalization of misdemeanor crimes. Like that's their ticket, okay? That is not a big tent ticket. That is a very radical ticket. And so the Democrats, a lot of them don't want that. A lot of them don't think that's going to capture the 80% in the middle. And so when you have some of them going for more of like a liberty party, remember Elon Musk is even talking about creating more of a moderate party. There are talks of a new third party in the United States, even on the conservative side. They're talking about the middle of the road. The Republican Party currently has more of, I mean, you might have seen it. There's a civil war among Republicans right now. And it's between this, kind of moral authority type party, right? They call it like, there's all kinds of names for it. You have a battle taking place within the Republican Party too, right? And this does represent more an actual kind of extreme right. I would call it fake moralism. You have a lot of people claiming that we can create an absolute conservatism. Moralism is forced upon you, whether you like it or not. But also representing, kind of a destruction of the Pax Americana, the destruction of what America represents globally, the destruction of the multipolar world order. They're also calling for the same thing the socialists want, which is the creation of the multipolar world order. They're calling for that. Non-interventionism, breaking up what America represents globally. It's the same thing. And so the Republicans also are risking getting pulled in that direction. I don't think it's going to happen. Because the reality is, and I think probably J.D. Vance will probably run it. I don't think he's falling in line with that whole system. But we are going to have an identity crisis of politics very soon in the post-Trump world, I think without a doubt. And there is a fair question of if the Democrats go very far left, will they have a split? I would actually say they've been trying to stop that from happening. They've been trying to have that not happen. Which is why a lot of them have actually gone along with DSA. They don't want to split their party. Conservatives post-Trump may face the same thing. There's the MAGA Republicans and there's the old school Republicans. There's the MAGA Republicans and there's the new, younger Republicans who are kind of extreme. MAGA does not represent those extremes. MAGA does not represent the George Bush era Republicans, or even not even the Reagan Republicans. A lot of them don't like Trump. So what does post-Trump Republicanism look like? Maybe that will also be a third party. I do think this is very possible in the United States. If you were to take my opinion on it, I would actually say that whoever's in the middle is going to capture the most. I would actually say that's what made MAGA work, is that Trump, even though he's framed as being far right, he's not. That's why he's getting voters who used to be Democrat and say the party didn't leave them, they didn't leave the party left them, because they stayed in the middle and the party went like this. The same thing can happen to the right if they go like this, because you're going to leave these people behind. I would actually say the 80% in the middle is how you win elections. And what is the 80% in the middle? Well, go back to the 80s and look at what the policies were, because that's basically what the average voter still demands. It has not changed. It has not changed. And so, we'll see what happens. I do think we could see new third parties coming about, because there's people already trying to do it. Already there are people working on it. Even Elon Musk, again, was talking about starting a Freedom Party as the new third party of the Republicans. And the current battle you see among conservative influencers, I think also represents an ideological dispute that may result in a splintering of the party. I think this is totally possible. So, we'll see. Although I don't think we're going to see it by 2028. I think J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio are the more likely candidates for 2028 for Republicans. Mecca Tamam, you're saying kids need a whole lot more education about the history and all its isms. It is utterly pathetic that 50% of young Americans think socialism would be a good idea. Well, and I fully agree with you. The problem is they're not being taught basic economics. A lot of them don't even know how to read. Look at the literacy rate among graduates. It's crazy. How do you graduate school and you can't read? Math proficiency is terrible. And look, I was not very good at math as a kid. After I graduated, I went back and relearned a lot of it. I went back. I did Khan Academy. Okay, I went back and redid math on Khan Academy. But I think you need a good math foundation to understand economics. And when you have kids who can't read, who can't do math, and whose entire view of history is based on identity politics, you're going to be raising little socialists. And that's what you're stuck with right now, right? They're being taught a different narrative on good and evil. They don't view good and evil as the human struggle against the devil, right? The struggle against human evil, against the darker sides of human nature. They don't view that as the challenge we face. The stories of heroes facing their inner demons and conquering them and going on to do great things in the world. And in fact, I'd actually say this is why movies are not as entertaining as they used to be. They've removed that inner battle. You know what I mean? The thing that we relate to. Like, what makes a good story? What makes a good story? It's somebody being faced with an external challenge. And in order to overcome the external challenge, they need to overcome an internal challenge. They need to conquer or rise above something in themselves to reach a state where they're capable of fighting that external battle and winning, right? That's what makes a good story, right? The hero's journey. How many movies have that now? You don't get it. You have a perfect person who has no internal challenges and fights solely against the evils of the world, which are mostly just identity politics things. How dare this person say a mean word, and how dare they oppose what I view as wrong, right? It's not entertaining. But I'd say it's not entertaining because it's not relatable. Why is it not relatable? Because every single person struggles with their own shortcomings. That's why. I struggle with my shortcomings. I'd imagine all of you do in some way, because that is human nature. We cringe at the memory of the stupid things we've done. We regret the bad decisions we made. We try to learn from the past so we don't commit the same things in the future. We're aware of our own flaws. We think badly of ourselves. A lot of us do. Only because we can recognize our own imperfections. And in the battle against our imperfections is the human experience. This is I think even the religious experience, if you want to get on that side of it. But a fake moralism is only external. A fake moralism is only when you try to, rather than conquer these things within yourself, you try to conquer them in others. And I don't think that's relatable. You call that a tyrant. It is the utopian heresy, as some have referred to it. The utopian heresy, that those who try to create utopia, to destroy the external evils but not the internal evils, themselves become the force of evil in the world. It's the heresy, the grand heresy of the world that predates even communism. Right? What a coincidence, right? And you wonder why we lack compelling stories these days. You wonder why we can't relate to the heroes of the new mythos, right? It's because they've destroyed the internal battle. And so you have kids these days who are raised with this alternate worldview, not even just of what education is, not only just of what economics is and math is and history is and literature is, but even with the plight of moralism and how do you approach the moral struggles of the world. They don't view this as an internal thing. It's merely do as thou wilt, and if you say I'm wrong for doing as I wilt, then you are the evil one. That's the basis of modern morality. And so, yeah, unfortunately, you have kids who've been raised with that, and I think they're miserable. I think it's why they self-harm. I think it's why they're suicidal. I think it's why they destroy themselves. I think it's why they're tearing themselves apart, and they feel something is terribly, terribly wrong, and they can't figure out what it is. It's because their entire internal compass of what life is has been drawn askew by an education system that has betrayed them. If you were to take my analysis on it. And so their own unhappiness drives them to fight for a fake moralism that they've been told is the right thing to do. And how do you fix that? How do you fix that? I don't think the way to fix it is to demonize them. I don't think the way to fix it is to kick them to the curb or fight against them on the streets. I think the way to fix it is to I don't want to sound cheesy, but to love them, okay? I think it's probably what they need more than anything, to be honest. But how do we achieve that, right? I have not been the best on this. I know I criticize these things quite a bit. But I've been thinking about this in my own mind. How do you approach this this utopian heresy that we're faced with? Because that is what it is, right? What does it mean what does it mean to restore a true religious order? I don't think that tyranny is the way to achieve it. I don't think a religious tyranny would restore religion. I think it would destroy religion, actually. I think an embodiment of moral principle or an attempt to and an extension of love is how you fix it. And I know this sounds cheesy because a lot of people preach about this stuff, but this is where my mind has been kind of lately, and it's what I've been reflecting on. Another question, James Dyson. You say, I think if we keep being passive about all this poo-poo that is happening in real time right in front of us, we're going to hurt. I agree with you. Hey, I agree with you. You got to listen to what the kids are debating right now. I'm not going to beat around the bush with it. You've probably seen some of these debates on the conservative side lately, right? You have Candace Owens talking about Charlie Kirk. I mean, look, I have a documentary on Charlie Kirk coming out soon. I want to tell you right now, I'm not going to get involved in a lot of what people are debating. I know some people have said, Josh, maybe now is not the right time to talk about Charlie Kirk. I'm going to, and here's why. I think that his legacy will be determined by the interpretation of his story. And you have people trying to reinterpret that right now. What did Charlie Kirk actually represent? If you were to take my opinion for it, he represented a unifying force across people who don't agree with each other. Charlie Kirk brought together different Christian denominations. Not even just Christian, he brought together different denominations. He didn't discriminate on that. Charlie Kirk had Candace Owens speaking at his events, despite the current battles. Charlie Kirk had Tucker Carlson speaking at his events. In fact, the last Turning Point, where I was also speaking, Tucker was there. I know there's a civil war taking place among these different groups right now, but Charlie Kirk platformed, not deplatformed. Charlie Kirk platformed all of them, and he was criticized for it. He platformed people who fight with each other right now. And why was that? The simple answer is this. Charlie Kirk represented the big tent. Now, I've done a lot of, you all know I like classical literature. One thing I like to study is what I would regard as sage kings, the kings of the past who are recognized as sages. King Numa, the second king of Rome, prior to the rise, again, the Roman Republic. King Numa, one of the greatest kings of history. King Rolf Krake, fantastic king. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms of China, right? If you get into the educations of the kings, the wisdom of kings, the Six Secret Teachings, one of the greatest military books I think was ever written, a Chinese book actually, was also an education for kings. What defines a king? A king is somebody who can represent conflicting viewpoints and conflicting parties. A king is somebody who can encompass people across different camps. That is what a king is. How do you achieve that? That is the greatest challenge of humanity. How do you achieve that without having people fight each other, right? Because humans will naturally devolve to tribalism if you let them, right? Humans will naturally start looking at, well, I'm slightly different from you, so we should kill each other. My belief is ever so slightly, or drastically sometimes, but even ever so slightly different from yours. Therefore, we are generational enemies. This is why you have like minor differences of denominations, like very minor interpretations at war with each other. Humans will devolve to that if you don't find ways to unite them with broader concepts. If you don't help them uplift themselves a bit, they will fight each other. Now, communism says you should unite them by terrorizing them. Unite them by, well, actually they don't unite them. It's about conflict. They actually try to create the struggle. Keep them fighting amongst themselves, create a totalitarian dictatorship to rob all of them collectively, and that the kings of the world, right, the communist leaders, will live like emperors while the petty masses destroy each other. That's the communist dream, right? The manufacturing of tribalism and social divisions in order to create a system of wealth for a communist elite. That is all it represents. But what does it mean to be a king? You need to encompass people. You need to unite people. You need to help them recognize higher principles that are unifying. Very few kings in history have achieved this, but it has been done. I would actually say that when religions, Jesus, they call him the King of Kings. Why is that? Well, you can have I'm not going to tell you how to interpret it. Part of that would be a divine authority, of course, right? I think that. But I would also say it's because the principles of love and kindness and turning the other cheek actually does create a type of unifying morality. It does create a way to create tolerance and understanding, humility, and peace, actually. The Prince of Peace, to create peace among tribalist factions. And so I think that any pure form of religious authority does create a unifying element for humanity. And I'd say only righteous religions can achieve that, right? That you can unite people under a higher moral authority. And so a good king also does this as well. I'm not saying you should mistake a king for a god by any means, right? Absolutely not. But I'd say sage kings, the reason you call them sage kings is because they achieve that. I'm not saying Charlie Kirk would have been some sage king, but he represented that unifying force. He brought people together across various camps, which is why a lot of conservatives said he would have been president. He probably would have been. Because he was capable of unifying people across diametrically opposed viewpoints. That's why. He brought people across different camps of the conservative movement who absolutely did not agree with each other. He even tried to bridge gaps with people who hated him, going on college campuses and asking questions and giving the microphone to whoever hated him most. I don't even know if I would, I don't know if I would do that, okay? Like, I'm going to a college campus, hey, who hates me most? Here's a microphone. Tell me why you hate me, and let's debate. Like, that takes some guts, okay? Like, I mean, look, in all reality, he was killed for doing that. He was. To be a broader unifying force means to encompass people. And so when we're talking about what's happening with people and kids and the problems they have, I don't turn a blind eye to things. I read people's views who I don't agree with. I've probably read more communist books than some of the most devout communists in history, okay? I don't recommend it because I think it's like drinking poison and trying to not be poisoned. I don't recommend it. It's like drinking poison. It is destructive to your soul. I do not recommend it. But I felt a need to take that upon myself in order to expose it, right? But to that point, I mean, look, I had a friend who was, becoming a Nazi. Frank, I'll have an honest conversation. I had a friend who was becoming a Nazi. And he was saying, hey, they were the true conservatives. And I said, no, they were socialists. They were socialists. Mein Kampf, what does it mean? It means my struggle. What is the basis of communism? The struggle of opposites, dialectical material. It's the same thing. Economically, it's the same thing, right? It's state capitalism. It's state interventionism. It's what they call a mixed model economy. You could argue that it is the lighter form of socialism implemented in the government. It's again, technically one of the lighter forms of state interventionism, but the goal of it is the same, right? I read this stuff in order to expose it, and I think in my show, many of you know that I've talked about it as such. Because why can I talk about it? It's because I've read it. I've read it and I've compared it, and I know that it's part of the same evil system that all of us should oppose. But you have kids now looking not at the true content, but instead of the talking points, just minor clips, little segments of surface narratives, believing the carrot on the stick represents the stick and not bait. And they get misled by it. They follow the Pied Piper, right, marching to their own doom, and don't realize what it is. The hell mouth, right? Did any of you know the story of the hell mouth? The great aroma luring people to the mouth of hell. That's the warning of history. That's the warning of God. Don't follow the scent of the hell mouth, right? The sweet aroma, right? That lures you so unknowingly to doom. Anyways, my point is I don't shy away from looking into things I don't agree with. And oftentimes I will throw myself headlong into studying things in order to properly talk about them. I've studied Duginism. I've studied just about every branch of communism. I've read every heretical book, every heretical theory, and come out of it in a way where I believe I can expose it and I can tell you why it's evil. I can tell you why it's evil because I've done that. I've drank these vials of poison so I can tell you don't drink the poison because I feel that is part of my responsibility. And I can tell you don't do it. But I can also see where what's happening because of this. So I know people right now on the conservative side, they're watching all this debate. You know, the big debate right now, Nick Fuentes was on Tucker Carlson's show. Right, fine. They're talking about the Goipers and so on. If you were to ask me what they're really talking about is, it's actually kind of closer in my analysis to Dugan. It's closer to Duganism, in my personal opinion. You know, it's this kind of fake moral world order of American non-interventionism, the focus on, you know, pulling back America from the world stage. And, you know, there are some legitimate arguments, but the communism tends to do that. You point to legitimate problems, but you give a solution that may create more problems. The end of the unipolar world order would create the multipolar world order. The end of Pax Americana would create the Pax Sinica. And so while I would agree that I wish America didn't have to be interventionist, I think that what we hold back is a greater tide of evil, frankly. There are some things I don't like in the world, but I understand why they exist. You see what I mean? And so I've been trying to understand where the kids are at, though, because, you know, obviously this is capturing a lot of kids. Why is this? And this is the conclusion I've come to. You have an entire generation of young men especially, and what have they been told? They've been told you are evil because of your birth. You are racist because of the race you are born into, not because you believe in any of this stuff, but because of the race you've been born into. You are sexist because you were born a man, not because you hate women, because you were born a man. They're being told that, you know, if you want to become an ally, you need to become trans, or you need to change yourself, or you need to agree with this worldview that a lot of them don't like. They've been told a false sense of morality. They've been told this diametrically opposed view of good and evil, that it's not rooted in tradition, but that's rooted in modern narrative, right? Again, going back to like what I would, you know, if you go back to social justice and the true origins of it, it was Cultural Revolution China, right? That if you follow the political agendas, you are righteous, and if you don't follow them, then you're non-politically correct and you can be killed. That was 1967 Mao Zedong, by the way. That was Mao Zedong in 1967. And so it's a political moral system, a political-based moral system, a type of good and evil that does not represent true religious good and evil. It's merely a, do you follow the political agenda? And so what you've had is kids who've grown up with this, and they're saying, the moralism you've tried forcing upon me is evil. And so they've tried going back to, well, what is good? If this is evil, then what is good? Well, obviously, if I oppose this, then I'm good. And so they have gone back to religion. Good, fantastic. I'm not here to tell you what religion to practice. I'm probably a bit different than most people on this. People criticize my religion. Fair enough. I may sound weird by saying this. But I don't get offended by it. In my faith, I recognize goodness in other people's faith. I do. I don't believe my belief is the only path to heaven. I don't. I believe God has ways of offering salvation to people of different areas in the world. I don't think is going to create someone born into a faith and just toss him into hell. That's not my belief. So I actually recognize goodness in other religions. And I know a lot of people who disagree with me on this, but I don't get offended by it. I don't get offended by it because I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's actually wrong for religions to discriminate against each other, because I think discrimination is what prevents the homogenizing of religions. I think it prevents the destruction of religion. I don't think it's wrong for people to maintain a moral base rooted in their one faith and not just mix everything together. I think that's fine. I think that sustains religion. And so I don't get offended by it. But you have these kids who are turning back to faith, and they're recognizing the evils that were attempted to be forced upon them. And they're saying, well, this is what faith says, and this is how far the narratives have deviated from what I recognize as faith. And they come to hate it. They come to hate it to the core of their being. And not only do they come to hate it, they come to hate the people of it. And if you were to ask me, I think that is I think that's a challenge that religious people face, is how do you face evil without hating the people who practice it? Right? I think that is one of the real challenges of religion, one that few religions have been able to properly face, and oftentimes go to various extremes of throughout history. Right? The zealot would say, kill the heretic, right? The zealot would say, well, burn the witch, all right? But if you go back to, like, I'd say the times of Jesus, or, you know, at the end of the Christian persecution, to the time of the Desert Fathers, actually a time where I really admire some of the writings in that time, the time of the Desert Fathers, they'd say, love your enemy, is what they'd say. That you should embody a type of love and kindness, and that is what changes the hearts of men, right? That is deep. That is profound. But when you create a type of false moralism, that is when you get into this us versus them type thing. That's when you get into this battle of hatred under the guise of religious love. And I'd say a false religious authority that wears the skin of a religion but does not embody it. And I think that's the challenge of our time. I think in my own religious viewpoints, I believe that religion is an internal thing, and that by embodying it internally, you can actually have a positive influence externally. I believe if you look, this is mostly a Christian country. I believe that if you go back to what Jesus represented, that is closer to what he represented. I believe if you go back to the time of the Desert Fathers, that is what they represented. If you go back to the time of the martyrs, that is what they represented. And I think it's easy for humans, you know, humankind, us all, to lose track of that. Because naturally, when you recognize good, you also see evil. And the question is, how do you face evil as a good person? The wisdom of God would tell us to face it with love, frankly. And I know this is a worn-out trope, but I truly believe this. And it's something I try to achieve, and achieve with varying success, okay? I have good days and I have bad days, but this is, for me, my own religious journey, my own attempts to become a good person. And I'm not a perfect person, but you know, I try to work on my shortcomings, and for me, that's part of my religious journey. So in other words, long story short, to James Dyson's point, being passive about all this stuff that's happening in real time with these kids and negative moral things, in my opinion, how do we face this? If you're passive, it will dominate. If you're quiet, it will spread. I think it does need to be talked about, and it does need to be exposed, and it does need to be explained. But I think that if you hate it, you will become nothing more than the counter-narrative dialectic, and it will propagate. It will continue to spread, because they'll say, "Well, I am justified to stand against your hate." That is what will happen, because communism is not necessarily. It's not necessarily far left. It's actually what you call the struggle of opposites. It needs a diametric opposition, right? Dialectical materialism. It works through this, and so you need equal hatred to drive it forward. If you break that cycle of hatred, then you destroy it, which is, I think, the religious approach to facing evil. I think that's the solution. Anyways. I guess I don't often get into my own religious viewpoints, but that is my religious viewpoint on this. That said, if you want to talk interesting conversation today, if you want to have more interesting conversations, then join me again tomorrow, where we'll talk about more of what's happening in our wonderful world. That'll be 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, please do not forget to like and share this video. I will see you then. And in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. Please take care of yourselves. And as always, stay informed and stay free. Thank you.